The girl who vanished in plain sight. I never thought I'd be the one to solve the case that haunted our town for 5 years. The case of Abby Mitchell, the girl who vanished in plain sight. My name is Mia Carter, and I was just a rookie reporter at the Canton Daily when Abby disappeared. Fresh out of journalism school, hungry for a story that would matter. I had no idea how this particular story would consume my life. It was October 12, 2019, a perfect autumn evening in Oakwood Heights, one of those picture-perfect Ohio suburbs where nothing bad is supposed to happen. You know the type: manicured lawns, neighborhood watch signs, parents who text each other when their kids are 2 minutes late coming home from school. I remember the first alert that came across the newsroom scanner. A missing person report. 17-year-old female. Last seen leaving a house party on Maple Street around 11:40 p.m. Another teenager who stayed out past curfew, my editor had said with a dismissive wave. She'll turn up with a hangover by morning. But something about this case felt different right from the start. Maybe it was because I'd grown up in a neighborhood just like Oakwood Heights. Maybe it was because Abby was only 5 years younger than me. Whatever it was, I convinced my editor to let me follow up. By the next morning, Abby still hadn't returned home. Her parents, Mark and Diana Mitchell, stood on their front porch, shell-shocked, as police officers came and went. Diana clutched her daughter's varsity swim team jacket like a lifeline. She would never just disappear, Diana told me, her voice cracking. She had a swim meet tomorrow. Stanford scouts were coming. Mark Mitchell, a high school chemistry teacher, kept checking his phone. She always answers our texts. Always. What we learned that day changed everything. Abby's phone had been found in a drainage ditch about a half-mile from the party. The battery was dead, but when police charged it, they discovered something chilling. Abby had been recording audio when she vanished. The recording lasted 18 minutes and 43 seconds. The first part captured normal sounds of a teenage girl walking home alone at night. The rustling of her jacket. The faint music from her earbuds. Her breathing, slightly labored from walking uphill. Then, at minute 17, a car slowed beside her. Need a ride? A male voice, distorted by distance from the phone's microphone. No thanks, I'm good. Abby's voice was clear, confident. The car accelerated away. Abby continued walking. At minute 18, the footsteps stopped. There was a faint shuffle. Hello. Abby's voice had an edge to it now. And then the final 60 seconds, the seconds that would haunt our town for years. A rustling sound. A muffled gasp. Then a voice, barely audible, that no one could identify. I've been waiting for you, Abby. The recording ended. The first 48 hours of Abby's disappearance unfolded like a textbook case study in missing person investigations. Search parties combed the woods behind Maple Street. Dive teams checked the reservoir. Police interviewed every teenager at the party, creating a timeline of Abby's movements. I shadowed Detective Lauren Reyes, the lead investigator. A no-nonsense woman with 15 years on the force, she'd never lost a missing persons case before. The hardest part is sorting through all the noise, she told me as we drove to re-interview the party's host, Jason Kaplan. Everyone suddenly remembers something important after a kid goes missing. Jason, a nervous senior with too much hair gel, insisted he barely knew Abby. She's, like, super focused on swimming and school. Not really the party type, you know. I was surprised she even showed up. Why did she leave early? Detective Reyes asked. I don't know. She was on her phone, then she just said she had to go. The detective made a note. And nobody offered her a ride? Tyler might have. They're like neighbors or something. Tyler Reynolds lived 3 houses down from the Mitchells. Captain of the baseball team. Harvard-bound. The kind of kid whose future seemed written in gold. When we interviewed him, Tyler's parents hovered anxiously. His father, a prominent surgeon, answered questions before Tyler could open his mouth. My son was home by midnight, Dr. Reynolds insisted. We have a security system that logs when the doors open. I did offer Abby a ride, Tyler finally said, his voice quiet. She said no. Did you drive past her later? Detective Reyes asked. Tyler's eyes flicked to his father, then back to the detective. No. I came straight home. Something about his hesitation made me jot down a note, Tyler hiding something? Little did I know how right I was. The case exploded on social media within days. Hashtag Find Abby Mitchell trended nationally. Her swim team photo, Abby with her dark blonde hair tucked under a blue cap, shy smile, determined eyes, became the symbol of every parent's worst nightmare. Theories multiplied faster than facts. Abby ran away. Abby was kidnapped by a serial predator. Abby was targeted by someone who knew her. Every armchair detective in America had an opinion. The recording became the obsession of true crime podcasters. Audio engineers enhanced it, analyzed it, dissected every second. The mystery voice, "I've been waiting for you, Abby," was played millions of times as experts debated whether it belonged to a man, woman, or teenager. 1 month after Abby's disappearance, the case hit its first major dead end. Despite thousands of tips, hundreds of interviews, and exhaustive searches, there was no sign of Abby Mitchell. No ransom demands. No activity on her social media or bank accounts. No sightings. It was as if she had simply evaporated into the crisp autumn air. Detective Reyes's confident demeanor began to crack. During one late-night strategy session at the police station, she confided in me. The problem is, Abby was too perfect. What do you mean? I asked. Perfect victims have too many people who'd miss them, Reyes explained. They don't have obvious enemies. No obvious motives for anyone to hurt them. It makes our job harder, not easier. I stayed long after my editor expected my story, digging through Abby's digital footprint. Her Instagram was filled with swimming videos, college research, and photos with a tight circle of friends. Her Twitter account mostly retweeted climate change activism. Her TikTok had exactly 3 videos, all of her cat doing tricks. Nothing stood out until I found a comment on one of her old Instagram posts. 9 months before her disappearance, someone with the username at truth_seeker2002 had written, "You can't hide behind that smile forever." The comment had been deleted, but it appeared in Google's cached version of the page. When I tried to find the account, it no longer existed. I showed Detective Reyes, but she was skeptical. Probably just typical teen drama. We've interviewed all her friends, classmates, everyone who might have had contact with her. What about her teachers? I asked. All cleared. Including her swim coach, who was at a conference in Cincinnati the night she disappeared. But something kept nagging at me. The voice on the recording had said, "I've been waiting for you, Abby." Not, "I've been looking for you," or, "I found you." The phrasing suggested patience. Planning. Someone who knew exactly where Abby would be that night. 3 months after Abby disappeared, I published my first major feature on the case. It focused on how the investigation had affected our community. Oakwood Heights had transformed. Parents no longer let their kids walk alone. House parties became extinct. Security cameras appeared on every porch. The Mitchells retreated into a private hell. Diana quit her job as a nurse to focus full-time on finding her daughter. Mark continued teaching chemistry, becoming a hollow-eyed ghost moving through the school hallways. I kept in touch with them, bringing coffees to their search headquarters, originally their dining room, eventually a donated office space downtown. Diana clutched my hand during one visit. "They're starting to forget her," she whispered. "Do you know the PTA discussed canceling the memorial swim meet? Said it was too depressing." My feature won a regional journalism award. I should have felt proud, but instead, I felt like a vulture. Here I was, building my career on this family's tragedy. The 1-year anniversary of Abby's disappearance arrived with a candlelight vigil. 1,000 people holding lights in the town square, Detective Reyes among them, now officially assigned to cold cases. I haven't given up, she told me that night. But I've run out of roads to follow. That winter, I nearly gave up too. My editor wanted me to move on to other stories. The national media had long since forgotten Abby Mitchell. Even the true crime podcasters had moved on to fresher mysteries. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in February 2021 when my phone rang. An unknown number. Is this Mia Carter? A male voice, young, terrified. Yes, who's this? I know who took Abby Mitchell. My heart nearly stopped. Who am I speaking with? That doesn't matter. What matters is I recognized the voice on that recording. But I'm scared. Scared of what? Of who, he corrected. Of who took her. He's powerful. Connected. If I come forward, my life is over. Let me help you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We can go to Detective Reyes together. The cops can't protect me from him. A pause. Meet me at Riverside Park. The boathouse. 10 tonight. Come alone. He hung up before I could respond. I debated calling Detective Reyes immediately, but something held me back. What if this was just another false lead? What if my source got spooked? I decided to meet him first, then bring in the authorities if his information seemed credible. That night, as I parked at Riverside Park, snow was falling in thick, silent flakes. The boathouse was a dark silhouette against the frozen river. I clutched my pepper spray in one pocket, phone set to record in the other. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Hello. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tyler Reynolds. Tyler. I gasped. You're my source. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair unwashed. Harvard sweatshirt stained and rumpled. I can't live with it anymore, he said, his voice breaking. I've tried. God, I've tried. Live with what? Tyler, do you know what happened to Abby? He sank onto a bench, head in his hands. I didn't know what he was going to do. I swear I didn't know. Who? Who are you talking about? Tyler looked up, his eyes filled with tears. Coach Wagner. Robert Wagner had been Oakwood Heights High School's baseball coach for 20 years. Beloved. Respected. A local legend who'd sent dozens of players to Division I colleges. And, according to Tyler, a predator. It started my sophomore year, Tyler explained, words tumbling out between sobs. Small things at first. Extra attention. Private training sessions. Then messages late at night. Rides home that took detours. I felt sick as I realized what he was describing. Did he hurt you? He said he'd make sure I got into Harvard. That he had connections. And if I ever told anyone. Tyler's voice cracked. He'd ruin me. What does this have to do with Abby? I asked, though I was beginning to see the terrible connection. Abby found out. She was tutoring me in chemistry, and she saw the messages on my phone. Tyler's hands were shaking now. She confronted me, said she was going to report him. That he shouldn't be allowed near students. When was this? The night of the party. She texted me after she left, said she couldn't keep this secret anymore. That's why I drove past her, to try to convince her to wait, to let me handle it. He took a shuddering breath. But Coach was tracking my phone. He always did, to make sure I wasn't telling anyone about us. He must have seen where I was going. So when you told police you didn't drive past Abby that night. I lied. Coach made me lie. Tyler was crying openly now. The voice on the recording, it's him. I'd know it anywhere. I wanted to take Tyler straight to the police station, but he refused. He was still terrified of Coach Wagner, who now worked at a prestigious private school in Columbus. "He'll deny everything," Tyler insisted. "It'll be my word against his. And my dad would never believe me." We made a compromise. I would investigate first, build a case, then together we'd go to Detective Reyes. I knew it wasn't protocol, but I also knew how victims of abuse could be re-traumatized by the system. Over the next month, I worked obsessively. I tracked down former players, searching for patterns. Most refused to talk. But 3, now in their 20s and 30s, eventually shared similar stories. Grooming. Manipulation. Threats. None had ever reported Wagner. They'd been too ashamed, too afraid of not being believed. I discovered that Wagner had moved between 5 schools in 20 years, never staying more than 4 or 5 seasons despite his successful record. And most damning of all, he had been Abby's neighbor until her freshman year, when the Mitchells moved across town. Diana had even mentioned once that Coach Bob had taught Abby to swim when she was little. He knew her. Had watched her grow up. Had access to her movements, her routines. When I felt I had enough, I called Detective Reyes. She listened to Tyler's story in a private interview room, her face growing grimmer by the minute. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" she asked him, her voice gentle but firm. "Because I was ashamed," Tyler whispered. "Because I thought it was my fault. Because I didn't know for sure if he had taken her, and I was scared of what my parents would say if everyone found out about what happened with Coach." Reyes nodded slowly. "We'll need to compare his voice to the recording. And we'll need more than circumstantial evidence to make an arrest." "What about Abby?" I asked the question we were all thinking. "Is she?" The detective's expression told me she believed what we all feared, that Abby Mitchell had been dead for a long time. The case against Robert Wagner built slowly, methodically. Voice analysis experts confirmed the recording matched his voice pattern. Cell phone records placed him in the vicinity when Abby disappeared. Former players came forward with similar experiences of grooming and abuse. Wagner was brought in for questioning but denied everything. With his clean-cut appearance and community standing, he seemed genuinely shocked by the accusations. "I was home with my wife that night," he insisted. "I barely knew Abby Mitchell." But his wife, when interviewed separately, revealed they had been separated at the time. She had been visiting her sister in Cincinnati, the same weekend the swim coach had allegedly been at a conference there. Still, without physical evidence linking Wagner to Abby's disappearance, the case stalled again. No body. No crime scene. No confession. Tyler fell apart under the pressure. His parents, unable to accept their son's revelations, sent him to a therapeutic boarding school in Arizona. Detective Reyes was reassigned to active cases. The momentum we'd built seemed to evaporate. Only Diana Mitchell refused to give up. She confronted Wagner outside his new school, resulting in a restraining order against her. She plastered Columbus with Abby's posters. She hired private investigators with money she didn't have. And then, almost exactly 3 years after Abby's disappearance, Diana Mitchell took her own life. The note she left said simply, "I'm going to find my daughter." I almost quit journalism after Diana's funeral. What was the point? All my investigation had done was destroy Tyler's relationship with his family, re-traumatize other victims, and push Diana over the edge she'd been teetering on for years. Mark Mitchell, somehow finding strength in his grief, convinced me to continue. "Diana believed you," he said as we stood beside her grave. "She believed you were the only one who could find the truth." So I kept digging. I expanded my search, looking at Wagner's entire history. I tracked down his ex-wife, who had divorced him shortly after he became a suspect. She had moved to Florida, started over. Bob was always secretive, she told me on the phone. Always needed his privacy. I never questioned it because, well, when you've been married 20 years, you get used to giving each other space. Did he have anywhere he went regularly? Somewhere private? There was a long pause. His grandfather's hunting cabin. Up near Lake Erie. Bob inherited it years ago, but he never took me there. Said it was his thinking place. My pulse quickened. Do you know where exactly? Some tiny town called Cedar Point. Not the amusement park, the actual village. Middle of nowhere. I thanked her and immediately called Detective Reyes. Though no longer officially on the case, she had never stopped caring. A cabin, she mused. Isolated. Private. Worth checking out. But we'd need a warrant, and we don't have enough for that. What if we just drive by? I suggested. Public road, no trespassing. Reyes hesitated. Mia, I know how much this case means to you. But I can't risk my badge on a hunch. Then I'll go alone. Mia. If I find anything suspicious, I'll call you immediately. If not, no harm done. She sighed. Fine. But you take pictures only. From the road. You do not approach the property. Promise me. I promised. I lied. Cedar Point, Ohio was barely a dot on the map. A handful of houses, a general store, and miles of dense forest leading down to the lake. It took me 3 hours to find the cabin, tucked at the end of a dirt road marked only by a rusted mailbox with Wagner painted on it. I parked half a mile away and approached on foot, heart pounding. The cabin looked abandoned. Windows shuttered. No vehicle visible. Dead leaves piled on the porch. I circled the property, staying within the tree line. At the back, a small shed stood apart from the main building. Newer. Solid. A heavy padlock on the door. Something about that shed sent ice down my spine. Why lock an outbuilding so securely at an already remote location? I knew I should call Detective Reyes. I knew I should wait. But 5 years of searching for Abby Mitchell had worn away my caution. The shed's window was tiny but uncovered. Standing on a fallen log, I could just see inside. What I saw would haunt me forever. A room with concrete walls. A narrow bed. A small table. Books stacked neatly. A sink and toilet. And on the wall, dozens of swimming medals hanging in precise rows. Abby Mitchell was alive. The next hours passed in a blur. My frantic call to Detective Reyes. The police response. The tactical team approaching the shed with weapons drawn. The discovery that the concrete bunker extended underground, accessed by a trapdoor beneath a rug. And finally, the moment when a pale, thin woman emerged, squinting in the sunlight she hadn't properly seen in 5 years. Abby Mitchell was 22 now. Her blonde hair had darkened. Her swimmer's physique had atrophied. But she was alive. Against all odds, she had survived. Wagner was arrested at his school, in front of stunned colleagues and students. The evidence in the cabin was overwhelming. Journals documenting his obsession with Abby that had begun when she was a child. The recording device he'd used to capture the moments of her abduction, kept as a trophy. Abby's reunion with her father was both beautiful and devastating. Mark collapsed at the sight of her, sobbing that her mother hadn't lived to see this day. She knew I was alive, Abby told him, her voice hoarse from disuse. I felt her with me. Every day. I was there when Abby was ready to tell her story, 3 months after her rescue. She had requested me specifically, trusting no other journalist with her truth. We sat in the Mitchell living room, now filled with welcome home balloons and cards. Physical therapy equipment stood in one corner. Abby was determined to swim again someday. I want people to understand how this happened, she said. Not just for me, but for Tyler. For all the others. She described the night of her abduction with remarkable clarity. Walking home from the party. Tyler driving past, looking upset. Then Wagner's car appearing minutes later. I recognized him immediately. He'd been our neighbor for years. I used to babysit his kids. Her hands trembled slightly. When he offered me a ride, I almost got in. That's the terrifying part, how close I came to making it even easier for him. Instead, she'd refused, sensing something wrong in his expression. She'd started her phone recording, a habit her mother had taught her when walking alone. He parked ahead and approached on foot. I tried to run, but... She closed her eyes briefly. He had a taser. When I woke up, I was in the bunker. For 5 years, Wagner had kept her imprisoned, visiting on weekends and school breaks. He'd built the underground room years before, she learned, originally as a storm shelter, then converted for his dark purpose. He was obsessed with preserving my youth, Abby explained. No internet. No news. Just books about swimming, about the Olympics. He'd bring videos of swim meets for me to study. How did you survive mentally? I asked gently. I counted days. I exercised. I pretended to cooperate. Her eyes, once vacant, now flashed with determination. And I never stopped believing someone would find me. When my mom died, somehow I felt it. After that, I knew I had to save myself. She had been working on the concrete around the toilet pipe with a metal spoon stolen from a meal tray, creating a hole to the outside world. In another few months, she might have escaped on her own. The worst part wasn't the captivity, she said. It was knowing what my disappearance was doing to my family, to my friends. To people like Tyler. Tyler Reynolds had returned from Arizona for Wagner's arraignment. He and Abby had met privately, a conversation no one was privy to. Whatever passed between them seemed to heal something in both. I don't blame Tyler, Abby said firmly. He was a victim too. Wagner manipulated him, just like he manipulated everyone. Robert Wagner pleaded guilty to kidnapping, imprisonment, and multiple counts of abuse. He was sentenced to life without parole. In the years that followed, 12 former players came forward with their own stories of abuse spanning decades. Abby Mitchell eventually did swim again. Not competitively, her body had suffered too much during those years of confinement, but therapeutically. She enrolled in college at 23, studying psychology with a focus on trauma and recovery. Tyler Reynolds finally found the support he needed. His parents, faced with irrefutable evidence of Wagner's crimes, reconciled with their son. He transferred to Ohio State, closer to home, and started a support group for male survivors of sexual abuse. And me? The story made my career. I won a Pulitzer for the series I wrote about Abby's case. I appeared on national news programs. I signed a book deal. But none of that matters compared to what happened at the 5-year anniversary of Abby's rescue, the day she invited me to swim with her in the lake near her father's new cabin. As we floated on our backs, looking up at the endless blue sky, Abby said something I'll never forget. You know what kept me sane in that bunker? Telling myself stories. Creating worlds in my mind where I was free. Imagining all the things I'd do when I got out. She turned to look at me. That's why I wanted you to tell my story. Because stories have power. They can imprison us or liberate us. I think about those words often. About how the stories we tell ourselves and others shape our reality. About how Abby survived by believing in a different story than the one Wagner tried to force upon her. I think about Diana Mitchell, who died believing her daughter might still be alive, and who was right. I think about Tyler Reynolds, who nearly destroyed himself keeping the wrong secret, and saved himself by telling the truth. And I think about all the stories still untold. All the secrets hidden behind perfect suburban facades. All the victims waiting to be found or freed. That's why I keep writing. That's why I keep investigating cold cases. Not for the awards or recognition, but because somewhere out there, someone else is counting days in darkness, waiting for their truth to be discovered. Sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to stop looking. One person who hears the voice no one else can identify. For Abby Mitchell, I was that person. For someone else, maybe you will be. The end.